We are being truly Janus-faced today as we look back and look forward to 2021. Hello, and welcome to Panelism, the podcast where we talk about comic books and graphic novels worth having on your shelf, and sometimes more. I'm Todd A.
I'm Taylor Trask, and I have a question right out of the gate. You pronounced it Janus in the intro, Todd. Is that the correct pronunciation? Because I don't think I've ever known.
I have no idea, because I said cilantro the other day and got called out hardcore for that.
Cilantro,
so
wow.
It may just be southern remnants in my accent. So
just say immediately that's a British colloquialism like aluminium. We're just cilantro, and then all the Brits are going to be angry, but you can at least save face for that moment.
There are some things I intentionally pronounce in a funny way, like Italian, but cilantro was not one that I anticipated. Cilantro. It just sort of came out of my mouth, and I'm still trying to remap my brain to say it correctly.
Were you in Tennessee for an extended period of time that just sort of crept into your vernacular, cilantro? I don't think I've ever
just
heard
my
that
youth.
Even. Well, all right. That's deep south. Cilantro.
I agree. I don't know how that. I don't know what happened. And
this is Talking Good with Todd and Taylor, so we've rebranded the show.
Yeah. Welcome to Herb Talk with Todd and Taylor.
It's been. We were just we had as is typical. We just had a extended sort of pre-show discussion to get our I can't even think of the term, to get our bearings. There we go.
Yeah. That's a good way to say it.
It has been. You remarked on something to me because I was all. And I still am like giddy. It's like, we're finally recording Panelism again. It's been so long. We barely did this at all in 2020. Like 2020 just kind of shut us down. Surely we only recorded like 5 or 6 episodes. And then you come on, you're like, actually, we recorded 17. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
And it's true. We actually, we did more in 2020 than I anticipated. So, I feel like we're already off to a good start.
I agree. And thank you for that segue, because as we knew we were going to do sort of a reflection upon the last year and thinking about what's ahead, and trying our best to summarize what books we're reading, or maybe shows, or something that really entertained us this last year. And I tried a little bit to do it by the numbers, and so I went and counted up how many episodes we did, and we did 21 episodes last year. And I thought, for all that time that I thought we weren't doing it regularly, this is almost twice a month. And
yeah.
So I thought I would pitch to you that we start doing, like, we just say, that's going to be our schedule, is twice a month, because weekly we know, like, we keep getting like knocked off track, whatever. We can make twice a month and do two new books every month. So that is my that's out there for your contemplation and discussion.
Well, I like it because it gets us back onto talking books regularly again. Most
Agreed.
things in 2020, we got off a little. I mean, we didn't get off schedule as badly as I thought we did, as you just pointed out. But we also I think the passion wasn't quite as there as it had been before. And we talked books, but we kind of got a little muddy with the and everything else kind of part of the discussion got a little more. So I'm all for this idea. If we do 2 books a month, you pick one, I pick one. We can announce it on Instagram beforehand, so we can kind of revisit a bit of that book club feel that we had for a little while there. And then we'll have, between the two of us, 24 books in the course of a year. But also, it also lets, that said, we don't have to not interview people. We don't have to not talk about movies and TV shows and all the rest. That will happen too on an as-needed basis. I'm guessing when we get to go back to movie theaters again, if that's ever a thing, like, we'll have plenty to rejoice about, and we'll just have to have the whole return to the movie theater episode. So expect that from us at some point. But WandaVision comes out in a week or two. That should definitely be part of the discussion. There's plenty. So this will keep us grounded in books, which I'm glad we're doing, because that's sort of the original intent of this iteration of Panelism has been the books. and we get to do, all the other stuff too. So I am on board.
Cool. I would just add in there, which is also a hopefully like a nice thing to say to our listeners, which is, it's January 3rd as we're recording this. And we went into 2020 with the best of intentions, and we have to have a little forgiveness for ourselves. We realigned a whole bunch of stuff on panelism and thought, we're going to be doing these monthly book clubs, and then we're going to do these chats with creators, and then we'll have, we were going to have these sort of themed episodes, and we just weren't able to do that because we weren't able to sit down with creators in person, and we, faced some recording challenges, and there was just the background noise of 2020, which made it so hard to sit down and just read a book for me.
Yeah, same.
So
it was probably my lightest reading year, even though I got a bunch of new stuff, and we've talked about it. Like there was that amazing Humble Bundle for humanoids, and I got a bunch of stuff, but my sort of zeal for reading really took a dive. For a lot of reasons. Among them being comic book shops were infrequently open or not quite the same experience as you're used to. I mean, it is a big distraction to walk into a shop you love and not be able to like smell the books and like kind of have that full sensory experience. Like when your mask is on, it's kind of a different thing. And then, you can't really go out as much as you used to shops and just kind of casually browse. And so there was a bunch of stuff. And then on top of that, it was more of a question of like, who's going to want to listen to us talk about books when everything is so heavy and blah, blah, so there was a little of that going on, but we still managed to pop out some episodes. So, go back and listen. I'll point out a few of my favorites. I was on a nice little tear doing interviews before COVID, so I would love to re-highlight my fireside chats with Daniel Rojas, which is episode number 141 for those listening. Frank Fry was before that, but I had a fireside chat with Charles Wefso. That was 150. He's a creator and host of the Hardy Boys Drink Cast, which has concluded, but also on the Panelism Network. And then I had I think we kicked off January 15th. In fact, I'm looking at it. My fireside chat with Frank Fry was 138. So I loved those interviews. Hopefully we'll get to do more as things, kind of normalize a bit and COVID isn't as much of a problem and we can do in-person stuff again. But I love those interviews. I would go back and check them out. If you're new to the show, or if you didn't quite pay attention to us last year, start with those. They're some of my favorite episodes.
Yeah,
and I think among my best personally.
I'd second all that recommendation and would also say that, they're great interviews from you.
Thank you.
You did great work, and I definitely think everybody should go back and listen to those. And to circle back up a little bit on that background noise and what we hope to get done and stuff was I went into lockdown and pretty quickly a group of friends established like weekly RPGs, usually D&D, but I got to play a bunch of other ones, and and one of the things that I missed out was because there was no way to sort of spontaneously hang out with someone. Yeah. You can't just be like, hey, what are you doing tonight? You've got to plan it out, and you kind of want to know, who's in what pod and where we're meeting and all that kind of stuff if you want to see anyone in person. And that took away this somewhat of a ritual I had of when we were doing books, just sitting down on Saturday afternoons and like reading the book or rereading or just refreshing my memory of something that I knew we were going to talk about. And so I kind of took it. I mean, I don't really like making quote resolutions or goals into 2021, but as I was looking through things, I knew I really want to, maybe I can't conquer that TBR pile, but I want to like refocus on reading and, getting some stuff done that way, because even reading comic books is an intellectual activity, and, I need to get back into that, and hopefully this background noise continues to, dissipate and we can get some stuff done.
Well, even if it doesn't dissipate quickly, like I'm sort of I've entered 2021 with like, okay, do over. So great. Like I'm truly ready to get back to a more normal cadence just in terms of my everyday consumption of stuff, even though I've got more to think about and worry about this year than I did last year. with the arrival of a little baby. We had Rachel and I had our daughter in November 24th specifically. So we've been a month and some change with her. We named her Moira Josephine, which if this was pointed out to me by, sadly I didn't come up with this myself. I wish I thought of this, but like somebody pointed out to me, a staunch X-Men fan, like, wow, we're really covering our bases. Like my last name is Trask. We named our daughter Moira. We called her Moira Josephine so we can nickname her Mojo. So that's
Rachel's last name is Xavier.
I wish. God, that'd be amazing. Moira Xavier Trask. That just all the things. But we were talking because Moira is sort of, other than Schitt's Creek is kind of the only thing in popular culture other than X-Men where like that's a common name. We often get asked like, oh, are you a fan of the show? I'm like, I mean, yeah, but that we came up with the name long before that show was a thing or even popular. But then I was thinking, I was like, holy crap, especially given Jonathan Hickman's, what he did with X-Men. I'm like, Moira McTaggart is like the most important mutant now, like in the entire pantheon. So like, holy crap, I can't wait to, when she is old enough, share with her House of X powers of 10 and go, does this resonate with you? Does this make your name cooler or not? And just kind of, use that as a jumping off point to maybe hopefully get her into comics too. We'll see.
Yeah, congratulations. Of course, I think we hinted that your baby was coming in one of our last episodes before the end of the year, and surprisingly, I don't think the arrival of Mojo was I don't think that delayed us as so much as just like life, other life things, and like end of the year, and it just. You were pretty willing to get back on that recording schedule, and things just kept coming up. It occupies
a lot of brain space. The waiting occupies a lot of brain space, and maybe just for me, but like, I was more angst-ridden about it than Rachel was. Rachel was carrying the kid, and I was just like, can we just have a date on the calendar when it's
right?
And interestingly, I'll say this for all those would-be parents out there who may be nervous about this too. They gave us a due date of November 21st. We were 3 days past that. So that was pretty damn accurate. For some reason in my mind, I'm like, oh, it's just a guesstimation. That can't be right. And we were 3 days past that. Like it was, it was pretty dang accurate. So if your OBGYN or whatever form that takes for you gives you a date, plan for it. It may be a little late, maybe a little sooner, but it's modern day science. Todd has really honed in on this stuff. So all that to be said, I probably didn't need to worry as much, but just this idea, this sort of like, I was reminded of the book Mr. Miracle, which we've talked about on this show. And that constant pulse of Darkseid lives, like every other panel, like you'd see this black box with like Darkseid, or is it Darkseid lives or Darkseid is? I forget. Oh, I hate myself. Darkseid, one of those two.
You of course mentioned a book that I do not have on my device in front of me.
Well, it's on my shelf. I just outside of reaching distance, I'd go grab it. But like just that constant pulse of like I'd be going through my day and it's just like she's coming, she's here. It's like and it's just not knowing like it could happen at any moment. Like I could be like mid sentence and like oh here we go. And so just that really kind of messed with me. And so once she was actually here, it's like okay. Even though there's a lot of work and other time involved, it's like, at least she's here. Like that part's done. Now we get to like, proceed as planned. So yeah.
Well, I like your view of taking 2021 as like a do-over or like just punching that reset button. But there is a really important skill that I've been honing over the last year, which and I know you have as well. And we've talked about this on several shows, which is kind of figuring out what's worth my time.
Yeah.
And
ooh, yeah.
We've talked about it, first of all, in terms of the value of a Comixology Unlimited account. Again, boy, it would be great if we were sponsored by them, but we're not. I'm just a corporate shill, I guess, which is I feel so much more liberated to check into anything that's unlimited, that's a free borrow and go, do I like this or not? So it does broaden my my input, but it also like I'm getting better at going like, what? I'm not engaged. Check out. And I've been doing that with shows because it's not like, and I guess this is strange in a time where, I almost have unlimited time to just sit on the couch and watch stuff. But I in March told you like, hey, you know what? The Expanse is on my to watch list. I keep hearing great things. I'm going to get through this pandemic. And I've been, I struggled through season 1. Season 2 was killer. I got halfway through season 3 and it just ground to a halt for me. Mm-hmm. And it's only in the last week where I had to remind myself of like, hey, look, you're not engaged with this. Check out. It's fine. It's not like there's it's not like there is no other stuff to watch. There is more than enough to watch forever. Yeah. And I feel that with our with our books going forward, like you and I have talked about how what we've just digitally downloaded or acquired from comic shops and sits on our shelves, we could do 3 years of podcasts, if not more.
Well, here's a question for you. So along this line of thinking, rewind back to like 2015, 2016 when we were kind of getting this show up and running. And it was no different then than it is now. In fact, if anything, it was probably more so because that was when, Image was really on fire in terms of like the diversity and quality stuff. And Humble Bundle was just getting started. So there was just as much, if not more then than there is now. And I didn't feel nearly as sort of like anxious about it. Like, oh God, it was just more
Agreed.
Like wade into the pool and swim and see what you get. And for some reason I kind of lost that last year specifically, but maybe a little bit before, where it just almost felt like this sort of like this dread of like, oh God, I'm never going to catch up. I'm never going to finish all this. And I really had to, kind of intentionally think about that over the past month and just look at my shelf and go, okay, I clearly can't read everything I want to read or watch everything I'm going to watch. And I think it's just, I really need to recalibrate and get back to like, if it really resonates with me, great. And if it doesn't, that's okay. I don't have to like dutifully read every single thing, because at some point you flip from being a fan to being almost like a music critic, where you just like, almost like a Pitchfork, where you just have to like listen to everything and then you become jaded and you have to like, throw shade on it. It's like, what am I doing? And I will have one thing in this episode before we're done that I want to throw a little shade on, just because it represents for me kind of like, not the bottom of the barrel so much, but just like, oh man, this is what happens when no one is told no. So we'll get to that. But like, other than that, I looking at my shelf, just going, and part of it too is there's books I own that I want to revisit, like that I read once upon a time. That I'm like, man, I'd love to reread that. And then I thought, last year, maybe we talked about this on an episode. I had a solution, which is what I'm just going to not buy anything new for the rest of the year and revisit all my stuff. And I couldn't. Like I tried dutifully to do that for a month, and I was like, I just need something new. So I found myself, almost sprinting to one of the comic shops here in the Springs and just going, I just need something new. And that, believe it or not, reinvigorated a lot of my like love of the medium. So you kind of need to really, I don't know where for me, it's like a constant dance, but I want to really get back to that place I was in, especially in like the end of 2015, which was just, let's throw the fishing rod and see what we get. And then, if it's not a fish we want, that's okay. Like, it doesn't have to be.
And for me, there are two things that are really correlated, which is one is that I was in my house so much more, and I got really sick of stuff around me, which is crazy because right now my house has never been messier. But just like having the physical to be read pile mocking me while I was home all day was like it was occupying mental space.
Yep.
Exactly
and what you mean.
My friend Boris has this great phrase about being a minimalist, which is space is a thing. Like, you actually want to have empty space. That is a positive. Don't think of it as something to like fill up, think of it as like, oh, I have space now. So I did a pretty good job of culling a lot of physical stuff there. Mm-hmm. And then the other side of it is unfortunately related, which is I don't go to comic book stores and have that impulse buying nature anymore, where I used to pick up a lot of single issues just thinking like, oh, I'll try this out. Now, for better and worse, because that is putting money in the creator's pockets and the comic book shop's pocket. And now I'm much more likely to, check it out on Comixology or see what I can learn on the web or like through, Instagram posts or something, which that sounds really weird, but I've just this week purchased a comic based purely on one Instagram post from this artist named Sweeney Boo. And I was like, perfect. I'm buying this graphic novel, done.
Is Sweeney Boo a real name or a stage name?
I believe that is a real name.
Okay.
That's
no
a
offense.
Great question. I have no idea.
It's like Sweeney Boo 1934. Like what are we talking about here? Is that,
Yeah, I
Go
just.
ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, right. No, they are credited as Sweeney Boo.
Okay.
On the cover of the book I bought was Eat and Love Yourself. And I really look forward to reading this. Anyway, I don't know where I got off topic there, but yeah, it's just my relationship with physical things changed last year, and not in a terrible negative way, So yeah, I'm going into 2021 with ass loads of books in my YAC reader and Comixology and iBooks and Kindle and
the physical shelf too. I mean, like it's one of those things for me where long story short, I'm recording now from my what we call the study in my house. We took a little room that's sort of, my house is super duper quirky. It's like the Weasleys from Harry Potter could live here. It's kind of got that vibe to it. But there's a room kind of that a couple short little 3 or 4 stairs lead up to from our den that we just call the library or the study. And my intention has been to build some permanent bookshelves in here, because right now I just have like a bigger and then a skinnier like IKEA shelf just sitting here, and that's kind of it. And so when we get some more bookshelves in here, I will have room to put more in, but only up to a point. So I've had to really get serious with myself and going, just because I'm adding more shelving this year doesn't mean I can just go whole hog again, because at some point that will fill up too, and then what?
Right.
I don't have the Neil Gaiman library or the Guillermo del Toro library where it's like an entire
floor of the house,
1,200 square foot. Yeah, and then even then I'm like, I could probably fill that up too. And then so I've become more obsessed with, especially with my physical stuff, like how can I curate like a really intentional, amazing collection of stuff where like every single book is like, holy crap. Because at some point I'm either going to pass it on to Moira or, just donate it to some amazing library. By the time when I'm too old to enjoy it, and if no one else wants it, got to go somewhere. It would be sad to just let it. So how can I make sure if it does get passed on in any capacity that it's really well thought through? And, but a lot of the show has been kind of that culling. Like, if I'm going to talk about a book on the show, and I want it to be something that like, oh, I really want people to check this out. It's not just a dutiful pick. It's like, no, this is interesting. This is a highlight in the medium. So not that I had a lot of cruft, but it's really caused me to go, okay, do I really like that volume of Wicked and the Divine, or did I just buy it because I wanted to continue the series, or does it really represent could that be a better pick as a digital thing if I ever wanted to reread it? So I'm kind of going through that audit as well right now.
Well, and it's tough too, because as of now, I don't know any good way to pass digital libraries along. I know
that's a tragedy.
You can download every CBZ, I think, from Comixology, but what am I going to do? Like, just say, hey, this hard drive is yours whenever I pass away.
There's a whole other episode for another day. Like, what do we do with our digital libraries when that day comes, and like, how does licensing work for that? Like, there's a lot of interesting questions that we can pull apart.
For sure. I didn't mean to lead us down that road.
Oh, no, I wanted to intentionally stop us because I have so many thoughts on that. Like, let's just make that another episode for another day, because I think, we would detract. I have some things though, Todd, that I want to ask you about and talk about.
I love it.
To kick our new year off. So let's do it this way if you're okay with it. Let's do maybe some things from 2020 that we liked that we either haven't talked about yet or want to kind of just reference again. And then let's talk about the things we're most excited for in 21, because there's some cool shit coming down the pike that I definitely want to mention. And then I do have a sort of just WTF, like, it's worth mentioning, because I really want to draw attention to a particular creator, and just, again, nobody seems to tell him no. And I want to make sure people are aware of this. So we'll get to that later on.
Excited to hear who this is.
It's not who you expect. It's somebody we've talked about briefly before, but I've hesitated mentioning more. And now that he's starting another series, I'm like, oh, okay. But let's kick things off. Have you? And not that you've had to. We really haven't planned most of this list. This is going to be kind of of the moment. But did you get a chance to watch Wonder Woman 1984 yet?
I did.
What'd you think? Just back of the book review.
So. It was a very weird experience for me, because I think if I had seen it in a theater, I would have been much more excited by it.
Ah, okay.
And I was I was very excited by the announcement by Warner Brothers that their whole 2021 calendar is rolling out simultaneously, on HBO Max and in theaters. I thought that's future facing. That's a good, because there are a lot of people that just frankly don't like going to theaters, and obviously they're closed right now or they're limited. Which, by the way, why didn't theaters like in June decide to like just physically strip out half of their seats and turn them all into Alamo Drafthouse kind of style things?
Yeah.
If I could go see a movie with one person and know that I was 6 feet away from the next person, that would be great.
Yeah.
Anyway, not now, but in a few months. But yeah, I watched a lot of it going like, okay, I get it. This is the superhero thing. This is, I'm like more so than other superhero movies sort of calling the shots. So what was your take on it?
I agree. My wife and I saw it on our TV at home. Obviously, some people, I guess some theaters are doing this thing where you can rent out your own theater for like $100 for like a date night if you want.
Oh, wow.
So some people just did that. It's like, you get a whole theater to yourself. Now, if you're interested in the big screen, big speaker experience, great. But for me, as has always been the case, I would say 80% of the theater experience is the communal theater experience. It's going, who's going to laugh? I want people laughing at the same jokes with me and going, at the same time as me. And like, one of my favorite things, as I've said many times on the show, is that opening night, that midnight opening night thing, which doesn't really exist anymore. Even prior to COVID, it had kind of gone away. 8 p.m., 7 p.m. the night before. It's not that midnight opening. There was a energy to that thing that like, even movies like Ted, the Seth MacFarlane teddy bear movie, Ted. Like I saw that in the theater and I died laughing at so much of it. Saw it again on TV and I was like, man, why did I find some of this as funny as I did? And it was because of that communal experience just enhances everything. So I think like you with Wonder Woman 84, had I seen it in like an opening week scenario with more people, I think I would have enjoyed it more than I did. It's not that I didn't enjoy it, but it didn't quite resonate with me as clearly as the first Wonder Woman did. That movie seemed aesthetically and structurally, it really worked. Like there was very little weak sauce in any of it, if at all. And with 84, it just kind of almost felt like three different scripts tacked together for some reason. I don't know if I would have come away with that feeling had I been in the theater too. Yeah. Because there was some of it that was intentionally designed to live and breathe in a big theater setting. But what I did like about it was that it was very intentionally kind of homaging that first and second Christopher Reeve Superman movie at like almost every turn. And to the point where I realized like, and I need to rewatch it again just to see if this is a good take, but like it occurred to me that it wasn't, unlike Stranger Things, which is a TV show that just chock-a-blocks all the, it mainlines 1980s nostalgia into your veins, right? Like that's its intention. I think a lot of people went into Wonder Woman 84 thinking that's what was going to occur. And instead, it's a movie that was like made to look like it could have been made in 1984. Not so much, hey, here's all the things about the 80s you love, and we're just going to like give it to you like at full volume. And it did a little of that, but you'll notice there weren't many licenses in terms of music. There weren't, you know, the things that they homaged, it wasn't like Wonder Woman falls through the roof of a blockbuster, like very intentionally, like, look, here it is. Like she didn't do that. All the references and things were almost more subtle than that. Right. It was more like, hey, pretend as though we shot this in 1984 and that's it. Like that's where we go. So I loved that aspect of it, and I loved that it was clear that either Patty Jenkins or I think Jeff Johns wrote it with her. I forget who, but like I think
you're right, yeah.
Whoever did the script, like clearly they're like, oh, that Superman, that Christopher Reeve Superman 1 and 2 was almost like a North Star. So like let's really like, a lot of it, especially in that beginning montage where she's just going about her day doing like, doing the small, like the little things. Like I was frankly surprised she didn't like save a cat from a tree because it was just very sort of like, cop, beat cop on the street kinds of stuff, which I loved. It's like, oh, let's make this personal again. Let's bring this back down to earth. It doesn't, some giant turd cloud in the sky is not going to appear, at the end of the movie for her to fight. That wasn't this movie.
Right.
They got a little close to that, but wasn't that. That wasn't what this was about, which I appreciated, and even the ending when it was, spoilers. It was less about her, fighting Maxwell Lord, like in a punching match and more about just like, hey, everybody, that was, say what you will about it, but it was something fresh. It was new. We haven't seen that for a while. So I really like that take as well.
Yeah, that's great. That actually makes me more excited about it because I did like how the even though I wasn't reflecting on this in the moment, I did like how the I guess her supervillain name is Cheetah or something maybe.
Yeah.
But I liked how Barbara, the nemesis of Wonder Woman, that was the physical confrontation.
Yeah.
And then with Max, it was more about like a mental or spiritual kind of confrontation. And that was really cool because when you're, the turd cloud that you're referring to, I guess is Justice League. And when that's happening, you're like, how do you even beat this? What's happening? What is, you have no physical like reference to it.
Yeah.
Side note though, I'm pretty sure Kristen Wiig also plays Bra Bra in Flight of the Conchords. There's like, they're both hitting on the same woman and one of them thinks her name is Barbara and one thinks it's Bra Bra. And they're like, no, Bra Bra is not a name. It's Barbara. And then it turns out her name really is Bra Bra. And that was throwing me off for the whole movie. I was like,
oh my God, you're right.
I kept hearing like,
Kristen Wiig.
No, it's Bra Bra, which they do like an R. Kelly, songs like, wait a minute, are you talking about the same woman we just saw in the park?
Wow. Was that season 1 or 2? Because I'm not as familiar with season 2 of Flight of the Conchords for whatever reason.
I don't know, but I would think 2 because the R. Kelly was kind of like they were doing more like parody stuff in season 2 than their own. I don't know. It felt like there were reference points for the song.
When they cast Kristen Wiig originally, I was like, really? And then it worked incredibly well because Kristen Wiig has that magical ability to play very realistically, kind of like just, scatterbrain, kind of, just I don't want to say dumpy, but just like, kind of just this less, just very scattered, very sort of just not confident, just kind of meh. And she does that incredibly well, but then she can also pull off the sexy thing really well too. That was a perfect choice. Now, I did not at all care for her character design when she became Cheetah, but that was just
totally.
I
agree.
I mean, if they had nailed that, I think by not nailing it, it opened the door for me to start to second guess a lot more of the movie than I would have otherwise. When they show her, you're like, ugh, really? And then you're like,
and fortunately, it's only like the last 20, 30 minutes or maybe even less than that. Yeah. But I agree because there's a fight where she's like in the kind of like 80s glam outfit and you're like, oh, this is everything I wanted Cheetah to be.
Yeah.
And then, and then she shows up looking like an actual cat and you're like, okay.
With like weird David Bowie, Ziggy Stardust hair. I'm like, what would that be? And then even the logic of it, right? It's like the logic was like, put all your rage into her. And like, as Maxwell Lord's like, summoning the demon. And it's like, and she just becomes a cat, I guess. I'm like, what? I would have rather a more, cause everything leading up to that third act was really solid. Like I loved everything was logical. There was a little more Maxwell Lord than I would have wanted. There's probably, others have said this, you could probably have cut 30 minutes from that movie and it would have been a tighter experience. But like, I was fine. It was almost like a director's cut. It's like, okay, fine. And then it gets to that last like 30 minutes. It just got really muddy for me. And I think all the little visual things that weren't quite as tight, I was like, okay, all right, I guess. But overall, it was, I didn't hate it, but I think the movie theater would have enhanced it for me. Yeah. And I'm glad it exists. The only thing I'll say is that like, I think Chris Pine felt a little underutilized. He was a damsel in distress again, and he was kind of the reverse of Diane in the first one, which is all fine. That's wonderful. But it just got like for all the things, all the opportunities, like one of the only moments where I was genuinely like, oh, this is what I wanted was when he was in the jet with her and she's talking. I forget what she said, but he goes, "Well, shit, Diana." Like he. Yeah. And I was like, this is the Chris Pine that we should have had this whole time. And so kind of felt a little underutilized, but you could nitpick and still maybe get 5% marginally a better movie. So I don't want to fall down that rabbit hole, but
yeah, I do think that part of like, so first of all, there's the theater thing. And then there's just this this is the first movie that I anticipated of 2020 that then kept getting bumped and stuff because of the pandemic.
A lot.
So I do feel like there's a weird little thing that's like they missed their moment. Like the excitement
I think you're right.
in the spring was gone. And I was briefly really excited, like, oh, it's coming out on Christmas Day, you know, everywhere simultaneously. This is going to be awesome. And then I didn't end up watching it on Christmas Day. So it's like, okay, you know.
Remember, it was supposed to come out Christmas of 2019, and they bumped it because of Star Wars, which they should have just stuck to their guns, because that Star Wars movie was not. I mean, that was the last movie I saw in the theaters, Todd, and I'm like, whoa. Like, of all the movies to end my run on, I was like, really? So Wonder Woman could have cleaned up if they'd come up. Yeah, you're right, absolutely right. Like, there was an anticipation. It almost felt more like a dutiful watch to some degree. Like, all right, I'm doing my duty to watch this movie, and I'm gonna enjoy it. And so I wish that wasn't kind of hanging over it, you know?
Yeah. Well, a good one to kick us off on. We had both compliments and.
I want to minimize. I want to minimize the negative stuff. Like my wife liked it. A lot of people really liked it, and for valid reasons. So I don't want to say. I don't want to put a stink on it. There was a few things that they just tweaked a little bit. It could have been as good as the first one. I think that's my only complaint. Well, but I love the aesthetic of it. You know, the aesthetic of it was really good.
I totally agree, and my reflection of it too is that if you're one of those people that has sort of a home theater setup, not that you have to have like a crazy one, but you have a dedicated entertainment room with like a decent sound system and a semi-large television, you're also going to experience it different than I did. I actually do have a television set. I don't know if television is still the right word. I have a large display, a Roku device, and watched it on that. So I did have a bigger screen. It's not like I watched it on an iPad or something. Not like when I watched Interstellar on my phone to make all of my friends mad. But
I'm sure Chris Nolan would love to hear that. Like, I watched Interstellar on my phone, Chris, and it was just fine.
In 480. But I know because I didn't have that dedicated sort of room for entertainment, I'm scrolling through my phone, or I open up my iPad or something. I was fell victim to the same, distractions that I do for everything.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a couple. So now that I know you have HBO Max on your Roku for a period of time, I did want to shout out because that was a
period of time.
Well, people don't remember. Like, Roku was the last one to. HBO is Time Warner. Who owns HBO now? Time Warner. Whoever does. We're being real prickly about Amazon and Roku, and I'm like, you're only hurting yourselves here. Like, so Roku got HBO Max as an app like literally days before 84 hit. I think that was
gotcha. Okay. Wow.
And for a variety of reasons, you look that up on your own time. But I was glad it finally did come to Roku because his Dark Materials season 2 was in full motion and has just concluded, I think, a week ago. And I was a big fan of the first season, and this season just continues to crush it. Like, you can tell they got really good at making the show. All the CGI looks even better. Just that everything is flowing really nicely. And if you haven't started it yet, I would highly recommend it, because it is the first time I have felt like I was reliving my watching of the Lord of the Rings trilogy as it was coming out in the theaters back in the early 2000s. Like, now I'm really excited for the final season 3 to come out in, the holidays of this year. So we got a year, assuming they don't get delayed by COVID stuff. Like, that will come out again, and like that will be the end of it. And so I'm really looking forward to it. The cast is stellar. If you've never read the books, it doesn't matter. Like, from everything I can gather, they honor the books incredibly well while still taking some liberties. The set design is beautiful. The locations are beautiful. It's probably the closest thing HBO has done to Game of Thrones in terms of just, overall kind of aesthetic and quality. Watchmen notwithstanding, because that was kind of almost a unique experience. But no, this is everything about it is just, I love it. So if you want some really good intellectual fantasy with a little YA tinge to it, like, grab it. It's nothing like that terrible movie that came out in 2006. You can just ignore that wholesale, shove it aside, pretend it never happened. This is how this book should have been adapted from the beginning. So grab that if you've got a month subscription to Max. Having watched Wonder Woman, make that your next thing. You won't be disappointed. But there's one other thing. I don't know. You've got Disney Plus, don't you?
Yeah.
last we've talked about it, I think we were chatting on Discord. Like the last we chatted, you have not yet at all picked up Mandalorian, correct?
Okay, so I am almost done with the first season.
Okay, good.
And several weeks before the finale, you told me to watch an episode of Mandalorian, and you said it doesn't matter if you're not caught up. You got to watch this because it's so amazing. And I did not do that. And then the finale happened, and several people told me, like, you have to watch this. So I've not watched that either.
Okay. Well, if you finish season 1, then just slow bake your way to the finale in season 2, because it will be more satisfying when all the pieces come together. But it is the finale of season 2 of Mandalorian. I mean, it's been a while now since it's came and went, but thinking back, going back to kind of last year and Star Wars and the Rise of Skywalker, which just, nothing needs to be said more about that. If you like the movie, great, but for me, it just clunked so hard and tried. And here's the best comparison. It tried to do so many fan servicey things that nobody asked for. It's like nobody asked for any of this. Like, if you're going to do fan service, it should logically fit the story you're telling. Don't just try to shoehorn in every reference you can possibly cram in a movie because, ooh, wow. Like, none of it resonated. On the other hand, the season 2 finale of Mandalorian had so much fan servicey stuff that you didn't even think about in that way because it all served the story. Every single element, every single string that was pulled served the story that they were telling. And you got to have some of the most, and I would argue probably the most fan servicey and equally amazing moment in Star Wars history occurs in that finale. And it occurs after moments that you already think are like, holy shit, this is the moment we've been building towards. And then you see that, and then something else happens, and you're like, and I don't. For you specifically, and people out there listening are probably like, oh, we already know what it is. They're cheering, they're shouting it out. But for you, I want you to get there organically, Todd.
Okay.
But when it happens,
I know some things about it, but I don't know the details. So I'm really excited to see what it is.
Even if you know the general gist of it, I would encourage you to not research the details and not try to look even at an outline, because the beats of the episode are very specifically kind of tuned to that final reveal being so. When you finally have watched it, we'll have to do another panelism about it, because there are so many moments, and they do it with a cast of probably about 8 people. Like, it is, they spent maybe a 20th of what they spent on Rise of Skywalker, and it was 100 times more meaningful because it's just everything that it does is so good. So I would, if you're still out there, you haven't picked up Mandalorian season 2 yet, please, like, that was one of the highlights of 2020 for me. Well, it was just like going, holy crap, this is what Star Wars should have always been. This right here.
And isn't part of that Mandalorian stood on its own from season 1? It wasn't trying to be all fan servicey. It wasn't trying to be like the J.J. Abrams film, where, like, and honestly, Rise of Skywalker, I think, retroactively kind of poisoned Force Awakens for me, because as excited as I was about Force Awakens and capturing the older aesthetic of Star Wars, and, not feeling like there's a billion clones here that I'm never going to keep track of, I was excited. I didn't really care that the story was so similar to the first ones. But then it became clear with Rise of Skywalker, like, oh, that's J.J. Abrams is just doing fan service. Like, this is not, like, it was so retroactively, like, stupid, and I think that's a big message to creators, is like, you can just make your original thing and have it tie into the larger story, and it's going to be such a better act of actual fan service. Like, Rogue One still blows me away, and it's like, sure, you have this MacGuffin of the Death Star plans, but that last 10 minutes of it you could have cut out and it would still be a great movie. But then the last 10 minutes happens, and I mean, I just remember that feeling of, like, in the theater, like, literally grabbing my dad's arm, like, holy shit, dude, do you know what's about to happen? Because I don't think he had quite pieced together, what he was watching. And, just like, that was an amazing.
Let me stop you, because that last 10 minutes of Rogue One is the entire finale of season 2. Like that feeling, that like, and it just escalates from like it starts off that way where you're like, and then beat by beat by beat by beat, you're like, oh my god, no, and then it's just like everything, and even things that you're like, surely they will never do. How could this possibly work? And they make it work so perfectly. You're like, oh my god. So it's like and then there's even deeper connective tissue than that I don't want to get into without spoiling anything.
Right.
But like Rogue One's a great analog for season 2 of The Mandalorian, because Rogue One does a lot of stuff that it fits the story that was already kind of established. It fleshes out those details in ways that are very meaningful. It makes you care about all those characters. And then it takes things that like George Lucas never had the imagination to make more of. And they're like, oh, no, this is what you, and you're like, and now all of a sudden Darth Vader is like 10 times cooler than he ever was before from like a simple little thing. All of that happens in the season finale of, and by the way, season 2, if you haven't watched it, there are episodes along the way that do that too. So you're thinking, oh my God, this is the Ned's head of the entire season. And then you get to the finale and you're like, it was all leading to this. And then I'll save one more thing. At the end of season 2, after the credits, they do a post-credits sequence you will want to stick around for.
Wow.
So think about that going forward. Like Disney Plus is like, oh no, every season now we're going to do, and I would imagine this is going to apply to like WandaVision, etc. Like they're going to do a stinger at the end of the season like they do the movies. Disney is in such a beautiful place right now to like basically go, okay, and I'll put money down on that. This is where they're headed. Yeah. We now have all the money to and time. Like we're not constrained by commercials. We're not constrained by like, it has to be exactly 27 minutes. Like all of that's gone now. We can take our time and tell these stories in a much more deliberate fashion instead of like a 90-minute movie where we kind of half-ass it. We can spend 6 hours telling the WandaVision story in a way that's really creatively satisfying. And oh, by the way, we can do a bunch of these series and then make the movies like the event of like the culmination of these series. So you're going to get more and more of these like slow drip, almost, the series feel more like comics in that like issues are coming out to build to the trade paperback of the season. And then if you pay attention to the series, then it's like, now we're going to have like these end game style movies that you have to see in the theater because it is such a spectacle, but you've had the time with these characters to really give a shit about them and really care, so that those movies are going to feel even more important now. If they do less of them and make them more of a cumulative event, I swear that's where they're headed with this. And then the Star Wars stuff will fit nicely in that too. And that, they've announced, like 5 new Star Wars series off the success of Mandalorian. And one was even, they didn't even announce it during their earnings call. You just had to find out about it at the end of season 2 of Mandalorian, which is a nice little teaser. But I'm guessing like that's where like Star Wars will live as like Disney Plus series. And then if you ever do get a movie again, it's going to be more like, oh, this is either like a one shot like Rogue One, or like, hey, we've been building over 5 years to now here's the movie you've wanted. And you're like, that I think is a really good strategy, because then you can really have everything. You can have your cake and eat it too. You can have really great quiet story moments with these characters that you've spent a lot of time with, and you can get the spectacle, and it all fits together. Like that's, Disney's in the best place to deliver that right now. And it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Good summary. I like it. That's a good period on the end of that sentence. Are there, and I don't want to like twist your head too sharply, but I was going to say, looking back, or is that where we want to go now? Or do you want to, do you have other stuff to sort of pitch forward?
I have a few more things, and you're going to like this. Well, real quick, one more TV show note. I ended up about a month ago falling into Stargate Universe, which is now free on Amazon Prime. I was a big fan of the Stargate series when it was airing on Sci-Fi. Universe came out like in 2010, 2011, and I remember seeing bits and pieces of it, but just didn't quite connect with it at that time. And I'm so glad I waited until now, because it is probably the best Stargate thing that exists. They only ever made 2 seasons. And they ended it at a place where it could be the series finale, but it could have gone on if they wanted it to. But the acting is stellar. Robert Carlyle is one of the main stars. He's amazing in it. It is like it's the mythology of Stargate, but with almost like Battlestar Galactica stakes, where everything's very personal and it's much more serialized. So instead of like, villain of the week and all of that kind of stuff, there's a little of that, but it's every episode links together a lot more. So it was a show that was built for streaming, just right before streaming really kicked off. So I highly encourage you, if you just want a nice, I think it's like every season's like 20-ish episodes, so it still kind of has that flavor of what TV used to be, but definitely built. Sci-fi definitely made it off the success of Battlestar Galactica. Like, let's apply this formula to Stargate and see what happens. I think it works really well. So if you like that show and that concept, but you want it to be a little more serious, a little bit more adult, a little bit more mature, is probably the better way to put it, then that's definitely encourage you Stargate, watch Stargate Universe and just be sad that it ended before its time. Maybe they'll pick it up again at some point. I doubt it, but you never know. So one thing I did want to mention,
I would pick up off of that because I was thinking like, oh, what am I watching right now? Is that finally on Disney Plus, all 8 seasons of The Simpsons are available to stream, and then 23 other seasons that they made for some reason. So along the lines of, finished before its time or something, sometimes you got a time to finish. And that time was 1999, Simpsons.
We are in lockstep agreement on this. I know there are people who shout, heresy, and there's people who discovered The Simpsons in 2010, and that's fine. But
my God,
talk
what
about
a world
beating
they live
a
in.
Dead horse. Like
what sweet summer children.
we to borrow from another show. Yeah. Well, I mean, when it becomes obvious when, like, how they used The Simpsons would occasionally do like a flash forward episode where you get to see what they all look like in 10 years, 20 years. When those episodes drastically start contradicting all the other flash forward episodes, you're like, okay, there's nothing to latch onto here. Anyway. One thing I did want to mention, kind of going back to our discussion at the beginning about, just there's simply too much to read. I had a bit of not a resolution, so to speak, but like definitely a checklist item for 2020 that will definitely carry on into 21. Is to read some of the books you've talked about on the show that we didn't sort of review together. We've had several episodes where you pick a book, I pick a book, and we talk about it and ask questions about it. And there were several of those that I'd flagged as like, I'd love to look at that at some point and this at some point. And when that list got to be about a dozen books, I'm like, I need to jump in. And it helps that for the 900th time, our unpaid ad for Comixology, a lot of these books were free to borrow on Comixology, if not discounted, if you have a membership. So I grabbed a couple of those. I want to point out 3. First is Batman and Robin, Batman Reborn, which is the Grant Morrison, Frank Quietly book you reviewed, and I cannot tell you which episode that was, so I apologize in advance. But it's the one with Dick Grayson as Batman and Damian Wayne is Robin. Yeah. So it inverts the serious Batman, lighthearted Robin. So now, Batman's a little bit more lighthearted and Robin's like this little angsty kid. And I love that version of Batman. I love that dynamic. I think it works even better than the sort of original dynamic. And you get this sort of extra benefit of Dick Grayson, having lost his father figure. Bruce Wayne is out of the picture at this point. He has to be a father figure to this little angsty version of Bruce, and you get to see that in reverse, and it's really satisfying. And Frank Quietly's art is always amazing, especially when he works with Grant Morrison. Like, it always, those two did the Multiversity issue, which was it was the Watchmen parody, where they took the what was it? What's the original characters? The Charlton characters. That the Watchmen were loosely based on, and then they made that like the Watchmen. They made it kind of a Watchmen. So Frank Quietly and Grant Morrison, anytime their names appear together in anything, give it attention, because I love those two guys. This, however, and I don't know if you in the episode mentioned this, but there's some really twisted stuff that happens in this book. From the villain side,
Joker is terrible.
Joker's terrible, but like the pig person,
I forget that's a separate person. Yeah.
Oh my God. I'm just like, I don't remember Todd mentioning this, or if he did, he downplayed like how grotesque this is. So not for like, this sixth grader in your life, although maybe, but like I would be cautious if you're a parent out there listening, like, oh, I'll get this for my son. Like, I mean, it might haunt their dreams if they're not of the appropriate age. So just be careful with that one. But what a great pick from you. Batman and Robin, Batman Reborn. I grabbed that. I also grabbed, and I actually like this one even more, Star Wars Dr. Aphra.
Oh, right. Yeah.
You talked about this one, and I grabbed that after Mandalorian season 2 ended. I was like, I need to find more Star Wars like this. And I was like flipping through. I'm like, wait, Todd recommended something like this. And I went back, listened to that episode because I wanted to get your full take on it. And then grabbed volume 1 and actually ended up grabbing the next volume after that, which was not free, but that was totally fine because it's a stellar book. And if they ever adapt something else new that you're not quite, in the Star Wars universe, but like totally new characters, I really hope it's this because it plays in the book. It plays very cinematically, which I always enjoy. And like, you can almost like see the storyboard, like beat for beat, like they would just film this. This is great. But Dr. Aphra as a character, she has a lot of the sort of things you like about Lando and Han Solo she's got, but with her own. It's not just like never call it, oh, it's a female Han Solo. Like, no, there's elements of that, but she is very much her own sort of character realized in the Star Wars universe. And just, I could read 20 more books about her, like make her like the main character of a series. It was wonderful.
And I think still like 5 volumes are available on Comixology Unlimited. I think. I
mean, grab volume 1.
Yeah.
Just do your duty, listener, and grab volume 1 of Dr. Aphra. And if you don't like it, fine. But like, Todd mentioned it and I had flagged it, and I might even love it more than you did because it really hit all the right notes, and especially in a world where now I have a very high bar for Star Wars things after Mandalorian. I'm like, okay,
right.
If anything falls below this bar, forget it. I don't want to even entertain it. And Dr. Aphra is definitely, a high bar sort of Star Wars thing. And then the other sort of series, and this was a latter pick from you, but even when we were talking about it last year, I was very interested in it, is the, I don't even know if you want to call it a series, because it is a series, but it's also like a collection, is the, I'll just call it the collection, Spira, which you mentioned on a recent episode.
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that.
I mean, really, like, in that episode, you had mentioned very explicitly, pardon me, that the art changes from issue to issue or from story to story. And I think that's a beautiful device. It really fits the story itself. I didn't find it distracting at all. In fact, if anything, it enhanced my love of the piece to see the art change and have a different artist's interpretation of this world and these characters. At the same time, the story itself is very simple. So I think that the art changing works even better because it's not trying to, you don't have to like simultaneously like take in all this like complex mythology. You can just like follow along these characters in this very kind of simple, and not to say that it's easy, but it's a cleaner story so the art can really shine more. And I am looking now for a hardbound, kind of collected omnibus of these Spira stories, because like I really want the printed artifact of this thing.
I'm glad you said that, because when I reflected on like highlights of 2020 and especially felt disappointed myself that there weren't many books that I had read that I really enjoyed, that was one of them. And if you listen back to that episode, which may be the last episode we did in 2020, I think it is. Yeah. I reveal in the episode that there's like a metadata problem in Comixology. So when I was viewing the series, I only saw one volume and was super surprised and delighted the morning before we recorded the episode that like, oh, there's 2 more volumes waiting for me. Yeah. And I, to be frank, have not read those yet, but I still feel that excitement of like, those are waiting for me. And that was one of my top books of 2020 for sure.
And talk about like the opposite of kind of Batman and Robin. Like I would give this to a 5th grader. Like this is like, it's super accessible, and it doesn't make it juvenile. It just makes it's one of those amazing all ages books that like, I think if you're an older reader, you will appreciate the finer sort of points of the artwork and just the, kind of that side of it. If you're a younger reader, I think this will really resonate with you, because it is about 2 young people kind of escaping and, kind of going on an adventure and all of that. So You're right though. I wish Comixology would get their meta together, because you see 3 separate series. You click a series and it just has that trade paperback there, so it's kind of misleading. But again, this is this is a book that started off as a webcomic, or still is a webcomic, and I really want them to do a limited run hardcover, and really go all out, make it like a $60 volume that has like, leather bound, kind of like, make it look like it's from that world itself. I would buy it instantly.
Yeah. And just to reflect a little bit about that book, one of the things that I've found challenging is finding like sort of fantasy literature that I can pass along to my niece and nephew, because it is like, because culture changes, and so much of that stuff that I read as a kid that I really loved is like, patriarchal in that way of like, it's about a boy and like a kingdom, and it's just it's like my beef with Game of Thrones, when friends would be like, hey, it's a fantasy, like, or it's supposed to be medieval times or whatever. And I'm like, no, it's supposed to be a fantasy,
Yeah.
And I think like Dragon Prince, for example, I think does that. So Dragon Prince to me is a better show to show kids right now than like The Hobbit, the animated Hobbit, because it speaks so much more to like the culture of now, even though it's told with like swords and sorcery. And Spirit to me is one of those books where it's like, yeah, I'd much rather young people read that right now than try to get into, the Book of Three or something by Lloyd Alexander, or like, Once and Future King, or, great books, but like, we have new takes on sort of mythological tales that are cool to read. So,
yeah. So I would highly, and we need to talk about an interview I want to have jointly with you. We need to get author Josh Tierney on a upcoming episode. Like we should reach out, because I would love to just pick his brain on Spirit. Like we both loved it. I want to go deeper on kind of some of the themes and just sort of the ideas and the design of it. Like how did he decide to just have different artists out of the gate?
Yeah,
wasn't
was
like
that a necessity or imagination based? And I love this idea of like going back to read the books that we've discussed and not read, because one of those books that you have mentioned a couple times, and you reviewed it a couple years ago, but then we mentioned it again on our Halloween episode in 2020. Infidel is free to borrow on Comixology right now, and so I've borrowed that, and that's sitting in my to be read list. And I need to go back through our older episodes and do the same thing, like pick out all those ones where I'm like, oh, this sounds really cool, let me read it. Along those lines, is Decorum still coming out, and are you still picking it up?
It is still coming out. I am still picking it up. Let me just look and see while we're on the topic. I'm actually on Image's website right now, because I do want to flag one other book before we move on. Let me see. Decorum. I mean, I'll buy Decorum physically forever as single issues. I'll probably rebuy it as a trade paperback. I'll probably rebuy it when the omnibus comes out. Just because like I often celebrate these series that function very cinematically. I mentioned Postal a lot as like the perfect comic for a TV show, because it's like it's literally there. It's the storyboard. Just adapt this panel for panel, and you'll have your TV show. I think Decorum is the opposite. Like I don't see how you would ever adapt that. I never want to see it adapted as a TV show, because it can only, kind of in that Alan Moore way, it can only really exist as it's almost intentionally designed to be a comic and nothing else. And I love that about it. And as a result, I feel duty bound to go to the shop and buy the variant copy and collect it in that way. So they're up to volume 6, came out December 16th.
Or like issue 6, right?
I'm sorry. Issue 6. Issue 7 comes out February, issue 8 in March, and that's all they have scheduled for now. So I definitely, it's moving very slowly, but what it's doing I think is amazing. And as I mentioned in previous episodes, it has changing art as well for a variety of reasons, although the same artist, but like the style will change, and they're doing a lot. Hickman and Mike Huddleston are doing a lot with just this genre. And that's a duo that I want to see do more. Yeah, as much as I like Hickman and Dragata on the East of West stuff, I think these two guys should partner up for a couple more series after Decorum's done.
Cool.
one thing while I'm on the Image website, I do want to mention this. This is my WTF of the episode. There's a series that is coming out January 13th of 2021 called Haha Number One. Literally H-A-H-A, Haha Number One. And I looked at it and went, well, that's either going to be incredibly lazy or very interesting. And then I looked at who's writing it, and it's W. Maxwell Prince. And you may wonder, who's that? Like, he is the writer behind Ice Cream Man, a very successful series for Image also, by the way. And I forget if he's written other things. I mean, Ice Cream Man's, they're up to 22 issues now, I believe. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, 22. Now, Ice Cream Man started as a very interesting, very captivating thing. It's an anthology series, almost like Tales from the Crypt Keeper. And then around issue 6 or 7, he starts to kind of give us this larger mythology where the Ice Cream Man is kind of part of a bigger kind of good versus evil, almost like Lost, where there's the Jacob and then the Man in Black. Like, it kind of had that vibe to it. And much like Lost, he hasn't really been interested in telling that story since like issue 12. Like, they just kind of dropped it. And so like every issue has been another anthology story, where the Ice Cream Man is involved, but nothing changes. It's just like these people have these miserable experiences, and that's it. And then the next month somebody else has a miserable experience. And like at some point after 22 issues, like the fact that he's not willing to revisit that mythology at a deeper level, or like make this like, where is this headed? Is this just going to be an anthology series for 50 issues and then ta-da? Like, it's so frustrating reading that book, and I just stopped a whole hog. Like, I was in it, I was like, well, I'll keep going. Maybe he'll come back around again. Maybe like this, they're building towards something, and no, nothing changes. It's this, people just have these terrible things happen to them, and that's the issue. And in 2020, Todd, that is not the story I wanted to have continue on without any changing or even be successful. I was like, why? Who's continuing to buy this just to remind themselves that the world is shitty and like shitty things happen to shitty people, and I guess too bad. It's like, and there's just no redeeming quality to it. So then to see Prince start a new series while continuing Ice Cream Man, that's not done yet. It's going to go on for who knows how long. To start another series with the laziest title ever. I'll give you a quick little preview.
Is Haha the confession that like Ice Cream Man was just like fucking with you?
Maybe. I mean, maybe you have to read Haha to like understand Ice Cream Man. Like, maybe. It says Ice Cream Man writer W. Maxwell Prince brings his signature style of one-shot storytelling, not signature style, to the world of clowns. And he's invited some of the comic industry's best artists to join him for the ride. Haha is a genre-jumping, throat-lumping look at the sad, scary, hilarious life of those who get paid to play the fool. But these ain't your typical jokers. So right away, I'm like, okay, so he's just doing Ice Cream Man again, but with like, he must have saw Todd Phillips' The Joker with Joaquin Phoenix and went, hey, what if we just did this?
Right.
A bunch of times. And I'm like, that's not, even if you have new artists, this has to go somewhere, Maxwell Prince. Like, this has to be like, you can't just do one shot after one shot after one shot while also introducing a very interesting mythology and then just ignore it because, man, whatever. Like, it's so lazy. And then the title just made me angry, Todd. I came across this and like, I was looking at like upcoming comics and I'm like, what? And then to see it was this guy, if it was a new creator, I'd be a little bit more forgiving, but I'm like, dude, don't bamboozle us again with your lazy, insular, just miserable, like, because it sounds like it's just the same thing as Ice Cream Man over again, but with clowns instead of an Ice Cream Man. So I don't know. I mean,
this is such a potent topic because like there's so many series that we feel frustrated because they end too soon, and there's so many that just keep going, and you're like, I was hoping there'd be an arc to this that would wrap up, and then there's stuff like this where it just it sounds like just playing in the sandbox kind of thing. And I don't know. Yeah. Hickman to me it's sometimes like inscrutable, but you can tell like he's digging into the same ideas maybe sometimes, but presenting them in a new way or twisting them in some way. It's
Hickman has characters that do things that create consequences for those characters.
Right.
So then in the next issue, you're like, what's going to happen? And they have to deal with those things. He doesn't just reset the board every single time for 22
well
issues.
said. Yeah,
It's
exactly.
like, dude, like, because you're right. Hickman, as much as I love Hickman, he does get a little redundant in his like conspiratorial kind of thing that he does. But you cannot tell me that East of West, Decorum, and Black Monday Murders are in any way the same book.
Right.
Artistically, stylistically, like intentionally, like they share similar themes, but they are very different pieces. And you can kind of, in the same way that like Stephen King horror stories kind of share a similar pathos. They're not the same story every time. Carrie and The Stand, like Carrie could be in The Stand, but like you don't think the whole time like, let's just Carrie again. It's like a totally different thing. So I hope Maxwell Prince is like listening or somebody passes this on to him and he wants to come on the show so I can like interrogate it. And granted, I would give him a very fair interview, but my first question would be, where is Ice Cream Man going? Do you have a plan? And if not, just admit it and drop this whole other mythology thing and just, make it something else. Cause I'm just like, imagine watching Tales from the Crypt Keeper. And the Crypt Keeper is every time, unless I'm mistaken, I don't think the Crypt Keeper ever enters the story himself. He is purely the narrator. He's like, oh, these crazy things have happened, and I'll tell you. So imagine, if you will, that somebody says, actually, by episode 10, you learn that the Crypt Keeper is a fallen angel, and that at one point he was in heaven. And you're like, wait, that sounds really cool. And they're like, yeah, but we're never going to bring it up ever again. And that's not what happens in Ice Cream Man, but you're just like, don't tell me that and then never bring it up again. Cause like now I'm going to start to look at all the stories in that lens and wonder when we're going to get back to that. And it's like, nope, we're never gonna talk about it ever again. But it was sure interesting, wasn't it? You're like, yeah, that's what Ice Cream Man is like. And what's really funny is right before COVID, Escape Velocity Comics, who used to have the book club that I love so much every month, they did Ice Cream Man, and I missed it. And I'm so mad I missed it because I would have been the greatest contrarian, and then like I would have passionately made my point about why Ice Cream Man is flawed.
So even a year ago, you were feeling that.
Oh, dude, I was feeling it even more then. But like now I'm almost more angry again that this guy's writing another series. I'm like, don't give him another series. He's got to finish this one first. Yeah. Says the fan of Jonathan Hickman, who doesn't finish everything that he starts. So I don't, Well,
and it's so interesting to me too, because I love that you brought up Stephen King, because I've heard about him and also a band.
I've heard about this author Stephen King.
Oh, I mean, I've heard it said. I've heard it said about him that like he has an idea and he'll like rewrite it until he feels like, okay, I've gotten that in its best form out of myself. Like, and I can't give any examples because I've never read him. But
what about what about Cujo and then the car one? That's kind of like it's Maximum Overdrive. Like Maximum Overdrive and Cujo, you could say, well, it's kind of the same thing, like a demonic thing that you otherwise would be innocent.
What about Carrie? And oh wait, not Carrie, but Carrie. Sorry, not Carrie. There's one that's about a murderous car.
Maximum Overdrive.
No, there's another one.
There's another one?
Yeah, how am I not thinking of that? But what I mean is that's one of those things where he gets fixated on like, ooh, murderous cars. And it's not like he writes them all in a row. He just kind of comes back to it. And I would bring up like that same thing has been said about the Ramones, which is like they were like, let's write all of our I don't wanna songs, Yeah. And then let's write all of our comparison. I wanna songs. And I think the Ramones and Stephen King were mutual fans. They did the Pet Sematary theme song and stuff like that. So it's like, there's that effort, and then there's like the Hickman thing that's like, I'm going to make a new prog rock album every
That's exactly what Decorum is, by the way. It's his prog rock album.
So some of the elements are the same, but it's him remixing it in this new, like he's pushing ahead. Both those things are like valid things to explore, but it sounds like Ice Cream Man is just missing the mark and like not exploring enough, and also not satisfied with just sort of making, horror comics. I don't know.
Okay. I would be okay if it was like 10 issues in, like it's anthology sort of, monster of the month. Fine. But he intentionally added this larger overarching thing and then kept poking at it. And then she's like, nah. And then we haven't heard a word about it since. And so I'm just like, why go to that trouble? And like, maybe it'll come back around again, but it's just like, it really does get after about 15 issues. And you're just like, this is just going to be every month. I'm going to go and pick this up, and something terrible is going to happen to somebody who either kind of deserved it or didn't at all. And a lot of times, like, the person doesn't deserve it at all. And then, like, and that's it. And there's nothing, like, no one saves the day. The person doesn't learn a lesson. They either die or are tortured to death or get trapped in some alternate reality where they're tortured to death. And that's the story. It's like, see you again next time, kids. I'm like, that you can't, and I shouldn't say you can't, because he's clearly selling very well. You know, a lot of people love it. And to them, I would love to get somebody who really loves Ice Cream Man, who can articulately defend it. Like, let's get them on the show, because I would love to have this discussion.
I like this compliment sandwich as a way of, like, pitching it to someone, you know.
And look, I don't want to just have an excuse to yell at somebody for an hour about Ice Cream Man. I truly do want somebody to go, here's what you're missing. Because if somebody can get me convinced, that great. Like, because I really do want to like the series more than I do, or more than I did, I should say. But I'm like, at the same time, I'm like, it's hard for me to wrap my head around this one, man. Like, same thing kind of happened to, and I don't have a dog in this fight either way, but like, a lot of people love Monstrous, and a lot of people hate Monstrous. That series, also an Image series, a lot, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of, like, in between where it's like, well, I kind of like Monstrous. Like, I'm just not interested in it, so I don't care. But like, a lot of people, there are people who will go to the mat for Monstrous, and a lot of people who go, no, in my dying breath, I will say that I hate Monstrous. And so it's, you know, it's having those discussions play out is kind of fun, because you get to really see, like, somebody who loves that thing very intuitively, like, defend themselves, and somebody who hates that thing, like, because I mean, that, for me, that's the best part of art, right? It's mostly subjective, mostly.
Right.
And so you get to see those discussions play out and maybe be convinced one way or the other, and see it in a different way.
It's also like, it's a different discussion entirely if these were books on DC or Marvel, and you think, oh, well, the creative team changed, or the editors stepped in and said, we need you to provide, you know, this is Image, so it should be creator driven, and it's, you know, that's point.
That makes me more passionate about it, because I'm like, this is their vision uninhibited. Like, nobody stepped in and said, well, actually, and maybe that's the point. I mean, maybe we're seeing with some of these series, specifically Ice Cream Man, maybe we're seeing like, when a creator-owned series doesn't have those restraints, doesn't have that editorial control or nudge. And again, you can say, well, it's a stupid argument because it's selling really well. I'm like, fine. But then if you're not told no, it feels like it has entered the realm of George Lucas without not Lawrence Kasdan. Who's his producer that held him?
No, that was Kasdan.
Was it Kasdan?
Yeah, and he directed Empire and was like a co-writer. Oh, I know I can't remember the name of the person you're thinking of.
Oh my God, Star Wars producer. This is going to drive me nuts. But it's like, there's a reason why those first 3 Star Wars movies work better than the prequels, because like, George Lucas had a guy say, I can see his face clearly in my head, I just can't think of his name. Yeah,
there's an editor checking him, sort of thing, or, you know, like a co-creator that's helping edit what's coming up.
And just saying no, like, hey, George, actually, maybe you don't want to do this, you know. And so for the prequels, nobody told him no. And so you get Jar Jar Binks. You get, like, you know, all the nonsense that you get with those prequels. Hang on, I've got to find this guy's name.
All the CGI. Yeah, exactly.
All the CGI. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, all of it's going to be no practical effects of any kind. Hang on, fill some time, Todd, while I find this guy's name, because this is going to drive me nuts.
My time filler was all like, okay, now to pivot to what I ask you other things. But when Taylor returns from his Google adventure, I'm going
Gary
to ask
Kurtz.
him.
There we
go.
Jesus. Gary Kurtz, who has passed away recently, I think, like not 2020, but maybe like 2019. 2018 passed away, but like just really competent producer. And I would argue, he was with George on American Graffiti, all his early stuff, even like The Dark Crystal, he was a producer on. So it's like, that's a guy who has creative chops, but knows how to like refine the diamond. It's like, let's just, you know, and if you get a guy like that in your corner, you want to trust them. And honestly, like for a publisher, that's what you want in an editor at large. For a publisher, is like that guy who goes, you do you, but I'll be here to keep you on track in case you get off. And, you know, you could argue Eric Stevenson at Image is that guy, but I don't think and I appreciate Image's hands-off approach, right? I wouldn't want them to meddle more than they are, but then you do end up getting stuff like this, which is like, man, what would Ice Cream Man have been? You know, because did you ever watch Erie, Indiana, when that was
I did not.
In our youth, early 90s series, ran for 2 or 3 seasons, probably also available on Prime, I would imagine, if you search for it. But Erie, Indiana was a similar kind of thing. It was about this kid living in this town, this fictional town called Erie, Indiana. And every week, some crazy sort of sci-fi monstery thing would happen in this town. And it was all kind of part of the town's fabric. Like this kept happening. But you watched, I forget, was the kid, Omri, the kid from Hocus Pocus played him prior to Hocus Pocus. But like, it would all kind of build on itself, right? So like if something happened in episode 5 that was kind of deliberate, they might name check it in episode 7 or 8. Like, hey, that happened, so we can't do that, you know? And so it kind of felt like as you're going through this show, like this kid and his friends, like they're your entry point, and, you know, it was grounded in that way. Ice Cream Man doesn't have that. The Ice Cream Man is the kind of central character, and he just keeps making life miserable for everybody, and you're just supposed to go along with it. So it's like, okay.
I feel like Ice Cream Man has become the somehow analog of 2020. We just let it end. Like,
I feel like
you're just creating misery. Like, let's just cut it off.
I feel like I'm back in I'm back in Catholic catechism, going to confession, just like airing my grievances. Like, I got to tell you about Ice Cream Man. Like, I'm in the confessional booth, just like, let me just get this off my chest, Todd. I gotta get Ice Cream Man off my chest, and then we'll be fine. And then, you know, this conversation might be part of another Ice Cream Man issue. Like, I'll know he's listening when like the next issue comes out, and it's like 2 podcasters, and like one of them like suffers a terrible fate. I'm like, well, clearly he's listening.
I'll try to pivot us to like wrap up the compliment sandwich of the episode of what would you say were highlights of books you read in 2020, you know, comic book wise, and like, are there any of those that you know you'll revisit?
Ooh, good question. Well, I mean,
if you want to think, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, the ones I mentioned that you already talked about, like that you kind of your recommendations from previous episodes, I think were really fun to both revisit, you know, because I had a cursory knowledge of them having talked to you. But I think getting into them deeper was really, really satisfying, especially because I became, just not even because of your recommendation, but I just became a fan of these works. They're just great books. Crap. You know, we could have, didn't I compliment Sandwich X of Swords last time too? This is becoming a trend.
I think that's what it was. Yeah. That's why I used that phrase.
I'm going to stay away from that. Yeah, how about you? Well, I think about this a little harder.
Sparrow was a huge one, but as soon as we talked about, let's do a 2020, like, you know, retrospective, let's just kind of flush the system. The one that I know that was absolutely the highlight of the year that I will continue to go back to was not published in 2020, but is the 3-volume March, John Lewis's autobiography, which I did end up giving to people at Christmas, that slipcase edition, because I just felt like this is a thing we can all have on our shelves and like keep going back to. It's so powerful, and I love the way it's told graphically, you know, and it's also one of those rare books where I read it digitally and will order the hardcover at some point just to have that on my shelf, you know, and feel like, okay, that's just maybe, you know, I mean, I'm sure I'll open it, but it's like, there it is, you know.
I'm gonna echo that because I'm looking at my shelf now. I was furiously scrolling through Comixology, but I would agree with that, both in terms of the timeliness of the story. You know, we lost John Lewis last year, and then
right.
All of the race-related things occurred last year. So it was a great time to pick up that book. But my God, it's so well done. It's so well illustrated. I mean, and it's as a historical artifact, it is one of the greatest ways to learn about the civil rights movement and kind of take that in. But just as a comic, just, you know, subject matter aside, as just it's just really well constructed, like really beautifully illustrated. That black and white, I think, serves it incredibly well. Just amazing collaboration between all the artists involved. And so I would agree, and I would highly, you know, we do a lot of pick up the digital version of things, but in this case, I would say absolutely go get the physical version. You want it on your shelf, A, and B, it just, I think, functions better as a physical piece.
Yeah. And there are others we've mentioned, Sparrow among them. But yeah, that's the one that just stands out to me in a year where I didn't have a regular reading habit. You know, that's one that I know I'll go back to. Are there, you know, my follow up to that is, do you have things on your to be read that you know you're tackling next?
You know, I do. But I'll give you two that have been on my TBR pile for way too long. Blankets I have mentioned in previous episodes.
Oh yeah.
But I want to I didn't quite finish it. I didn't quite give it the attention it deserves. So it's a thick book. It's a drawn and quarterly book. And then The Sculptor, which I think you even gave me.
Yeah.
I have gone through a little bit, and it's a Scott McCloud book, so I owe it to myself and the industry to read it, because Scott McCloud's a genius. I just haven't had the time, because it's a thick book. So I think those are two that I will be both reading and absolutely talking about on one of our monthly book episodes. I think, I was going through like what I'm most excited about in 21 list, and frankly, the three things I'm really excited about are TV shows that are coming up.
Oh, okay.
We got WandaVision, which I am convinced is going to be as revolutionary as the first Iron Man movie was, in terms of like how it sort of resets the stage and what we think these kind of these Marvel or superhero shows should be or could be. I think likewise, Falcon and the Winter Soldier will equally be game changing. So those two shows I cannot wait for. Equally, I have been now waiting with bated breath every day for a trailer for Kevin Smith's Masters of the Universe reboot / sequel, because it is a direct sequel to the 80s series itself. I can't wait to see how that plays out, but it's going to be different animation, much better writing, much better everything. So I cannot wait for. And then frankly, this is going to sound cheesy, but I know right now there are books being written as we speak, written and illustrated, that will become my new favorite thing this year, that will come out, in the summer or the fall. So I more than anything, there's a lot of stuff that I know about that's coming, books like Crossover and Inkblot, which I'll talk about another time. And there's other things, Decorum, obviously we talked about before too. There's books that I'm interested in that are known, but I think it's that next trip to the comic shop where I'm like, and I see something that just the cover blows me away, or I discover something just serendipitously. Like, that's what I'm most excited about. It's just that kind of having that feeling again, like, oh my God, this is my new favorite thing, and then just going deep on it.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, I'm pretty sure Eat and Love Yourself will be the next thing I read. But I finally did pick up a copy of Nimona. I think I may have mentioned that in a previous episode. And I mentioned that Spera Volume 2 and 3 await me. And then I did actually near the end of the year pick up that Rat Queens Volume 7. So we kicked off 2020 with me talking about Rat Queens and this weird creative history it has. And this is like a new creative team that's just sort of taken over the property. And I'm curious to find out how that goes. And that's sort of like my short, TBR. And of course, I think I still have several volumes of Dr. Aphra that you have excited me to get back into and read.
Oh my God, you got to keep going on that book. Like I can't say enough about Dr. Aphra. We'll probably have another Aphra-oriented episode soon, because I want to dive into some of those additional volumes that I picked up. So let's soft pin that. But I'm excited. This is the first panelism of 21. I think it sets the stage nicely for what's to come. Like we said in the beginning, we're going to be doing more intentionally book episodes every month now going forward, and definitely other things too. But this gets us back into kind of our bread and butter, which is reading books and offering, I think, a really elevated take on those, and letting you figure out what the books worth having on your shelf actually could be or should be or are.
Yeah.
I can't think of a better way to say that. So yeah, I think that's a great recap.
Cool. And this is us pushing the reset button.
Yes, definitely the reset button across, go back and listen to our 2020 episodes by all means. But I am more excited, I think, even about what's to come. Rain or shine, this is going to be the year that we kind of get back on track on everything.
I agree. And I meant to point this out earlier. There's a discussion of the Marvel movies in a episode that we titled something about potluck back in July 2020. That conversation is so bonkers to me because it's like, you can tell we're like feeling the strain of lockdown and we're like rewatching Marvel stuff. And I have the goofiest opinions on it, but I think it's more enlightening of what my previous opinions were. So that's worth just listening to the first like 20 minutes of that episode to hear this nutty discussion.
I need to go back to, yeah, it'll be a fun historical artifact to kind of keep those 2020 episodes sort of on their own shelf and be like, what was life like then? Can you hear the stress? Can you hear the
right
the sort of despair of just like, is the world this way now forever? Or we just assume our life now?
Assume our life. Oh my gosh. On that note, people can find us at panelism.inc, INK. That is our website and also our Instagram handle. And as Taylor mentioned, we'll do our best to sort of plug on Instagram what's coming up in the next episode as we get them recorded, so we can kind of have a little book club discussion, if people want to catch up before the show comes out. But yeah, I'm looking forward to kicking off this reading.
Sounds good. And we'll have, like Todd said, we'll have the January picks up soon. You can read along with us, and more to come. I think a lot more to come on Instagram. I'm feeling that excitement again. We'll probably have a website or two up before too long, and more on the panelism front in 21. I'm excited. It's been great chatting with you, sir, and catching up. And we will catch you all on another episode. Keep on listening. Keep on reading. And what is it used to say? We'll see you when we see you. Is that the?
Yes, I can't remember. We'll see you then, or we'll see you at another time.